Welcome to the Growing Food and Feeding People podcast. Whether you're a backyard gardener, a market gardener, or a small-scale farmer just starting out or a seasoned grower, this show is for you. Join us as we share tips and tricks, tactics and hacks for growing food for yourself, your family, and your community, as well as sharing stories here from the field and other growers and farmers making a difference in their local food webs. My name is Cody, and I will be your host, so let's get growing. All right, welcome back to the Growing Food and Feeding People podcast. This is our Friday edition, and we are jumping right into our third episode in our Planning Your First Garden series. And man, this is going to be a good one. It is chocked full of information for you guys just starting out. And we're actually going to cover the 10 biggest problems that new gardeners face. And I know I faced every one of these at one point or another. Have you ever thought about starting a garden, but maybe found yourself overwhelmed with many challenges that come with it? Now, whether you're a seasoned gardener or just starting out, there's always obstacles to overcome. I mean, I guarantee you, as I go out and start working in the garden here in just the next week or so, finally, here in Michigan, I think we're going to be able to get out there and start working the soil a little bit next week. But as we do that, and as I start growing plants, there's definitely going to be obstacles that come up. They come up. New ones pop up, new challenges pop up every single season. It doesn't matter if you're brand new or experienced, there's always going to be obstacles. Now, obviously, the more experience you have, the more obstacles you see in advance and plan for them. But nonetheless, there's always that variable. Now, gardening is a wonderful hobby that can definitely provide you a wide range of benefits. You know, for me, definitely, such as improving your physical health, reducing stress, and connecting us to nature. I mean, there's a lot to be said just for getting your hands right down deep in the soil. That's been proven to have benefits in itself to reduce the stress. But it can also be a daunting task, and especially for new gardeners. There are so many variables to consider, it's no surprise that beginners often face challenges that can be discouraging. In this podcast, we're going to be discussing the top 10 problems that I see most new gardeners face and provide solutions to help you overcome them. So whether you're a seasoned gardener or a beginner, this podcast is going to be for you. Well, let's jump right into it. Problem number one I see all the time is lack of knowledge and lack of planning. They go hand in hand. And it's kind of one of those you don't know what you don't know things, right? It's not your fault that you don't know, you just don't know. And one of the biggest mistakes new gardeners make is not planning ahead. It's awful easy to get excited and start buying plants without considering the overall layout and design of the garden. And without proper planning, you might end up with a garden that looks cluttered, or worse yet, doesn't grow well. Put all the hard work in and don't get the harvest that you're expecting. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably all about taking on new challenges, going all in, and having a can-do attitude. And I am all about it as long as we cover the 7 P's. Proper and prior preparation prevents a piss poor performance, right? So I'm all about jumping in, going all in, but really planning. And that's where this comes in. It's, you know, to avoid this problem, you want to take the time to plan out your garden design. This includes which plants you want to grow and where they're going to grow. You're going to want to consider the amount of sunlight and water that each plant needs, as well as the soil type and any potential obstacles like trees or other structures. You know, we did a whole episode on designing your first garden, and we cover all of that. But that is one of the biggest mistakes I see is new gardeners and not actually going through the exercise of writing out or designing a detailed plan, or maybe not knowing how to go about that. You know, as well as, you know, choosing the wrong plants for your garden can also lead to poor growth and reduced yield, and increased susceptibility to pests and diseases. Now, to choose the right plants for your garden, you're going to want to consider your climate, your soil type, your sun exposure. You know, we did a deep dive on exactly how to choose what to grow, right? You know, because starting a garden without proper knowledge is kind of like driving a car without a license. You're really setting yourself up for failure. You know, my daughter, she is actually in the process of getting her license right now. So this is actually quite timely. But I wouldn't dream of sending her out on the road without the proper training. No way in heck, right? Well, we shouldn't do that to ourselves when we're starting a garden either. It's really best to go in as prepared as possible and with as much knowledge or help as possible, for sure. Lack of planning is really just kind of setting yourself up for failure. So the solution is to educate yourself. Learn as much as you can. Take classes, read books, read articles, watch videos, and seek advice from experienced gardeners. Knowledge really is power when it comes to gardening. The things I know now compared to the things I knew then is night and day difference, even though I thought I had a pretty good handle getting started. But the reality is you just don't know what you don't know, and experience is the best teacher. But I'm not going to beat that one into the ground anymore. It just really is important to learn as much as you can and then set out with the best plan that you can. Now, the second problem that I see new gardeners face is poor soil quality, soil problems. Right? When it comes to gardening, soil quality is really everything. Poor soil quality can lead to poor plant growth, and it can also affect the flavor and nutrient content of the vegetables that you grow. And that's, why are we growing vegetables to begin with? Because we want fresh, flavorful, nutrient-rich veggies. And one of the main causes for poor soil quality is a lack of organic matter. So adding compost, manure, and other organic matter can definitely improve the soil structure, nutrient content, and moisture retention. I'm a huge fan of sphagnum peat moss added to my compost blend. That really helps with the organic matter and hold moisture. Now, before planting, it's a pretty good idea, if you've been following along in the series, to test your soil so you can identify any nutrient deficiencies or pH imbalances so those can be fixed. Because the reality is there are solutions to just about every problem you're going to face. It's just identifying the problems that you have so you can come up with the right solution. Another problem when it comes to soil is soil compaction. Soil compaction occurs when the soil particles are pressed tightly together, basically, compacted down, making it difficult for air, water, or plant roots to penetrate it. This can lead to poor plant growth and increased susceptibility to disease. I'm a biggie on a no-till or minimum till gardening practices, so I'm not counting on running a tiller down it every year to break it up. To avoid soil compaction, we'll avoid walking on our beds. That's why we have 18-inch pathways between each of our 30-inch beds, so we don't have to step on the bed. And having them at 30 inches allows us to straddle them or work from either side when we're harvesting or planting. So that helps reduce any soil compaction that could come from actually walking on our beds. So you really want to avoid, especially walking on soil when it's wet. You can also use raised beds, and you can mix organic matter to improve your soil structure. And I think I'm going to do a complete episode in the next couple weeks all about custom soil blends, soil structures, and amending the soil based on the problem that you've got. Because the reality is, the soil is the foundation of your garden. And if it's not healthy, your plants, they're just not going to thrive. New gardeners often make the mistake of not testing their soil before planting, which can result in poor growth or even plant death. The best way to ensure healthy soil is to get it tested and add any necessary amendments before planting. I prep all of our 30-inch by 50-foot long beds at the beginning of the season to make sure that they're amended for the crops that I'm growing. And this way you can provide the plants with the right nutrients and pH balance they need to grow strong and healthy. The other issue with soil is improper fertilization, like I said there. So, your plants can only be as healthy as the soil they're planted in. Poor soil quality is going to lead to stunted growth, diseases, and other issues. Make sure you test your soil and amend it accordingly. You can add organic matter such as your compost and manure, and that'll definitely improve the soil structure and fertility. And your plants will love you for it. Now, the third problem I see facing new gardeners is watering issues. Watering your garden might seem like a no-brainer, but it's actually one of the most common mistakes new gardeners make. Overwatering can lead to root rot or other diseases, while underwatering can cause the plants to wilt and die. To avoid this problem, you're going to need to learn how much water each plant needs and when it's best to water them. It may not be best to water your plants in the heat of the day when it's 95, 100 degrees out. They may not appreciate that. And in general, it's better to underwater than overwater because most plants can recover from a temporary lack of water, and you'll usually be able to spot it. Watering is a critical component of gardening. One of the most critical. One of the top 3, I'd say. Now, another way to avoid overwatering is to ensure that your soil has good drainage. Now, underwatering can be just as damaging as overwatering, of course. Plants need a consistent supply of water to grow properly, and the lack of water will lead to wilting, stunted growth, and reduced yields. To avoid underwatering, water plants regularly, especially during hot, dry weather, but not during the heat of the day is my tip. Water them at night or early in the morning or late in the evening. Now the fourth problem that we run into as new gardeners is pests and diseases. Pest infestations are a real deal. I know I've lost entire beds, entire 50-foot beds, entire crops because of pest infestation. That happens once, maybe twice, before you figure out exactly how to deal with that pest, right? But pests can wreak havoc on your garden, damaging plants and reducing your yield, quite literally down to nothing in certain instances. Some of the most common garden pests include your aphids, your slugs, your snails, your Colorado potato beetle, your tomato hornworm, your cabbage moths. And to avoid pest infestations, you really want to keep your garden as clean and tidy as possible. You're going to want to try to remove the weeds and use natural pest control methods, obviously, such as companion planting, crop rotation, and neem oil. Once in a while, you may just need to go in there and pick the buggers off by hand to get control of the situation. Now, another problem in that is plant diseases, and they can also be a major problem for new gardeners because common diseases include your powdery mildew, blight, and rot. Now, to prevent these diseases, you want to practice good garden hygiene and remove any infected plants immediately. And like I said before, try to avoid overwatering. Nothing can ruin a garden faster than pests and diseases. New gardeners often underestimate the damage that insects and other critters can cause, leading to an infestation that could quickly get out of control. And I mean quickly, guys. This isn't, I saw it yesterday, I'm going to take care of it tomorrow. Right? Tomorrow's going to be too late. I promise you. That is something that when you see an infestation break out, you want to jump on it immediately. And I don't say this to scare you, but I say this as a reality because I've lost entire beds due to pests in the past. So to avoid this problem, you really want to learn how to identify common garden pests and diseases and take preventative measures like using organic pest control methods like we spoke about, not using pesticides if you can avoid it at all cost, planting disease-resistant varieties, and practicing good sanitation. Because I promise you, pests and diseases will wreak havoc on your garden if you're not careful. Remember, some of the common culprits are going to include your aphids, whiteflies, and powdery mildew. And I cannot stress enough the importance of companion planting and removing infected plants promptly to prevent the spread of diseases. All right, on to number 5. That would be sunlight and temperature. That's a biggie, sun, soil, and water. Sunlight is essential for plant growth, and insufficient sunlight can lead to stunted growth, reduced yield, and poor plant health. To avoid this, you're going to want to choose the right plants for your location, as we spoke about in the past, and ensure they get enough sunlight. Because the reality is plants need the sunlight to grow, and without it, they're not going to thrive. New gardeners will often make the mistake of planting in areas that don't receive enough sunlight, leading to poor growth and even death or crop failure. So to avoid this problem, you're going to want to learn how much each plant needs and to make sure to plant them in areas that receive the appropriate amount of sunlight. Plants have a specific requirement when it comes to sunlight and temperature. Some plants are going to thrive in full sun, while others prefer the shade. The solution really is to choose the plants that are well suited to your growing conditions and be mindful of the sun exposure and temperature changes throughout the garden day. Another thing that comes into play with the sunlight is extreme temperatures. Extreme temperatures can also be a problem for gardeners. Cold temperatures can damage your plants and reduce your yields. That's why you want to know your first and last frost dates, especially up north here. We're zone 5B, and our last frost date, it's not till the last week of May. So a lot of new gardeners especially will really jump the gun and plant outside way too early, and the frost will just wipe them out. Again, another mistake I've personally made on specific crops. 2 years ago, I lost an entire 50-foot bed of cucumbers by planting them a week too early. So it's really something you want to take seriously and think about the extreme temperature. And on the flip side of that, while hot temperatures, they can cause your plants to wilt and die. I love growing salad mix. And if you're not protecting those plants from extreme temperatures, say with using shade cloth or mulch or cloths, when it's 95, 100 degrees, my lettuce and spinach is going to wilt and die. It's not going to produce well at all. So I have to use a shade cloth and other techniques to make sure that my lettuce and my salad mix doesn't get too hot in the middle of summer. And that can also include planting heat-tolerant varieties. So speaking of salad mix, why did the lettuce win the race? Because it was ahead. Slip that one in on you guys right in the middle. All right, problem number 6 is weeds. Weeds can be a huge problem for new gardeners. Heck, weeds can be a huge problem for any gardener. I know everybody likes to go, oh, no till, no weeds, blah, 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 blah. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not always the case. And depending on your weed maintenance plan, you may still have weeds. Because the reality is weeds are a common problem for gardeners, and they can quickly take over if left unchecked, kind of like the bug situation or the pests. It doesn't take long, especially when you get a flush of weed seeds. They will compete with your plants for nutrients, water, and sunlight, so making it harder for your plants to grow and thrive. But there are a few solutions that can help you control the weeds in your garden. One of them we use, of course, is mulching. Cover the soil around your plants with a layer of mulch to suppress the weed growth. This will also help retain moisture and soil and regulate the soil temperature. And there's several different types of mulching that you can use. From a fabric mulch that we use on our salad mix beds and a few other plants, to wood chips, to leaves, and crop residue. So there's a handful of different mulching methods you could use. Another way to help with the weeds is going to be hand weeding or hoe weeding. Pulling your weeds by hand, depending on how big your garden is. Making sure to remove the entire root system if possible. That's a good option for small gardens or for spot treatments, areas with weeds. Really, as far as a maintenance plan goes, I need to be out there with the collinear hoe at least once a week in every bed, and really should be checked on a morning walkthrough and just taking care of them as soon as you see one pop, because it's just not worth letting them get out of hand and take over a bed. Not all weeds are created equal, and some of them are a lot harder to get rid of than others if you let them go too far. Now, the third way to combat weeds is companion planting. A good example would be planting squash at the feet of your corn or your pole beans. And the squash plants are going to cover the ground and suppress the weeds, because weeds will quickly take over your garden and compete with the other plants for the nutrients and water, like I said. So pulling weeds regularly by hand or using organic weed control methods like mulching or using a hoe on a regular basis is really going to be the solution to keep your weeds under control. All right, moving along. Now, problem number 7, and this can be a biggie, and that's timing. Timing is everything when it comes to gardening. New gardeners often make the mistake of planting way too early, like I said before, or way too late in the season, leading to poor growth and a lack of harvest. Now, not starting your seeds or transplanting or harvesting at the right time are all going to lead to problems for you down the road. And so to avoid these problems, you're going to want to learn the best planting times for each crop in your area specifically and follow a planting schedule. You can also use tools like a soil thermometer to make sure the soil temperature is where it needs to be before you transplant into your beds outside. And then I would utilize definitely some sort of planting calendar. I've done a whole video on how you can use Google calendars to plan out your season. There's several different planting calendars out there, so I would definitely suggest using a planting calendar so timing doesn't become an issue when it comes to planting or harvesting your crops. All right, now the 8th problem I see new gardeners run into, and this is real easy to do, and that's overcrowding. Now, I'm a big believer in high density planting. However, when you're growing in small spaces, it can be challenging, but it's not impossible, and new gardeners often make the mistake of planting way too much in a small space, leading to overcrowding and poor growth. To avoid this problem, we want to choose plants that are suitable for small spaces and use creative gardening techniques like vertical gardening and trellising, and container gardening and interplanting, i.e. companion planting, so you can make the best use possible of the space that you've got, because it's real tempting to plant as much as possible in your garden. I know, I've also made that mistake when I first started out as well, so believe me when I tell you, when I talk about these problems that most new gardeners face, I speak from a place of experience, because I've encountered almost every one of them at some point in the past. So the biggest issue when it comes to overcrowding is that it can lead to competition for resources and eventually end in poor growth. And what that really comes down to is just learning about proper spacing. Like I said, I'm a big believer in high density planting, meaning planting as much in the space as effectively possible for optimum growth for the plants, but not overcrowding. So learning the proper spacing for each crop is pretty essential. And as a matter of fact, I've probably got a resource that'll tell you exactly what to plant those crops at. And that's really the solution, is just following proper spacing guidelines for each plant type, and then consider using containers and vertical gardening to maximize your space. Heck, I use some of those out in the market garden to maximize my space. So that's not just for growing in small spaces. Now, the ninth problem I see new gardeners run into, and it really isn't any fault of their own, it's kind of one of those you don't know what you don't know things, but it's actually neglect and maintenance. A lot of new gardeners think they can just plant it and it'll grow, right? But neglecting your garden can actually lead to a host of problems, including poor plant growth, of course, pest infestations like we spoke about, and disease. So here's a few solutions to help you avoid neglecting your garden. First one is, like I said in the very beginning, is plan your garden, right? Before you start planting, take the time to plan out your garden, decide what you want to grow, where you want to plant it, how much space each plant will need, and when you're going to need to harvest it. And this will definitely help you stay organized and on track. Water regularly. Plants need water to grow, so make sure you are watering them regularly. The frequency and amount of water is going to depend on the type of plant and the weather conditions for your area, so it's hard to tell you an exact schedule. But what I actually suggest, if you can, if at all possible, take a daily walk around your garden. I prefer to do it first thing in the morning if I can, but if I can't, at some point throughout the day, I'm going to try to take a walk throughout the entire garden to make sure none of my plants are drying out or have gotten too much water. Now, the third thing you want to think about when it comes to not neglecting your plants is fertilizing it, right? Having a good feeding schedule. Fertilizing provides essential nutrients for your plants, so you want to be sure to fertilize regularly. Now, again, you don't want to over-fertilize, and quite honestly, if you amend your beds at the beginning of the season, it won't take a whole lot of fertilizing throughout. There will be a few plants that you'll want to fertilize throughout the growth stage, but it's a lot easier to stay on top of it because there's many types of fertilizers available, so do your research and find what's best for your plants. Of course, we don't use anything but organic fertilizers out here. And if you've watched any of our videos, you know our plants go pretty darn good. Now, the fourth thing to reduce neglect is to monitor for pests and disease, right? Keep an eye out for signs of pests and disease in the garden and take action immediately if you spot any problems. Don't wait 2 days. Definitely don't wait a week. It'll be too long. It'll be gone. Your crops will be damaged. And there may not be anything to harvest at that point. And this will help prevent the problem from spreading and causing damage throughout the entire garden. And like I said, by taking a daily walk around your garden if possible, so you can check for water, weeds, and pests, you'll be able to stay on top of it and neglect will not be an issue. Now, the fifth thing I've got to combat neglect is, like I said, stay organized. Keep track of what you've planted, when you planted it, and any other important details. Keep a garden journal. Keep some notes if you can. This will help you stay organized and ensure that you're giving your plants the best care they need to thrive. And a big bonus to this is actually going to help you be able to plan your garden for next season. So staying organized, keeping good notes, keeping track of what's going on will definitely help you avoid neglect in your garden. Because gardening requires consistent care and attention, and neglecting your garden can lead to overgrown weeds, pests, and a handful of other issues. So the solution, set a gardening schedule and stick to it. Make time each week for tasks as weeding, watering, and harvesting. And like I said, if you can take a daily stroll around your garden, you'll be able to stay on top of it without any issues. Now, the 10th problem I see with new gardeners, and again, I've been guilty of this, is lack of patience. Gardening is not a quick process, and it can be frustrating for new gardeners who want to see immediate results. Plants can take weeks, months, or even years to grow to maturity, depending on what you're growing. And while there are ways to speed up the process, such as buying plants or using organic fertilizers, there's still a certain amount of waiting involved in a garden. That's why I like to tell you to grow radishes. They're a quick win. 27 days and you've got a crop. But the reality is patience is a virtue in gardening, and rushing the process can lead to mistakes and disappointment. For example, over-fertilizing or over-watering can actually harm the plants rather than help them to grow faster. It's important to remember that gardening is a journey, not a destination. Although the harvest should be celebrated, enjoy the process and take pleasure in each small success. Each quick win, it'll definitely help you get through the season. Now, the best solution to lack of patience is to start small and set realistic expectations. Choose a few plants that grow quickly and are easy to care for, such as herbs or cherry tomatoes, or like I said, radishes or bunching onions. Celebrate each small victory, such as the first sprout, right? Man, I get excited when I see the first sprout of the season. Heck, I get excited when my seeds come in the mail and I can start planting. And then I get really excited when I see that first ripe tomato or ripe pepper, or have my first fresh salad of the season. That one there really gets me. So take note of the progress over time and enjoy the process and watching the plants grow. Gardening is a waiting game. Plants take time to grow and mature, and it can be frustrating not to see immediate results. But practice patience and enjoy the process. And remember that every small step you take in your garden brings you closer to a bountiful harvest. Now I'm going to give you 2 more bonus problems that I do see on occasion. The first one is not considering plant compatibility. Obviously, I'm doing a whole series on companion planting, and it's because of that right there. Once you learn which plants work well together and why, it will change the entire way you look at your garden and how you grow. The last problem I see is not pruning correctly. And again, I've fallen victim to this as well. Now, I'm not one of those guys that just prunes it right down to the stem, everything neat and tidy always. However, there are specific plants that will grow better and produce a heck of a lot more by pruning properly. So learning what needs pruning and how to prune it is definitely an easy solution to that problem. Now, if you are a gardener feeling overwhelmed by any of these problems, don't worry, there is help. A garden consultant can actually help you navigate the challenges and set you on the path to a successful garden. Because the reality is there just isn't enough hours in the day to watch YouTube videos or listen to podcasts. And especially once you get into the season. So having a professional there to help you write a customized plan for your specific context, because like I say, everything is contextual depending on where you live, what you're growing, why you're growing. Having somebody that's been there can maybe see problems before they exist and help you put together a plan for what you're trying to accomplish. Because really, the whole goal here is to grow more food and feed more people, right? So I have opened up Project Feed Your Neighbor, and that's what it's all about. Because there's never been a more important time, at least in my lifetime, when we do need more people growing food and feeding people. And that's where I want to help. A couple of years ago, I made it a mission that I want to have a direct hand in feeding 10,000 families a year fresh local veggies around the world. And the only way I can do that is by teaching you guys how to grow food and feed people in your communities. So whether you're a brand new gardener just starting out, who definitely would love a hand planning out your garden for your specific needs, or you've got a little more experience in growing food and you want to take it to the next level so you can start feeding your community, that's where I want to help. That's what Project Feed Your Neighbor is all about. So if you think it'd be beneficial to jump on a Zoom call with me, talk about what you've got going on and what you want to accomplish, there will be a link in the show notes where we can connect. And again, guys, this is a free 20-minute consultation where we can chat one-on-one all about helping you grow more food. Because I know I sure wish I would have had a garden consultant my first year to really help me navigate the challenges and get me on the right path to a successful season. Hopefully you have been inspired or entertained, learned something or laughed. I truly hope you're enjoying the podcast, and as always, I cannot thank you enough for tuning in and joining me every week. If you'd like to continue the conversation, we can chat over on Facebook at Simplistic Farms LLC, or you can send us a comment over there on YouTube at Simple Ain't Easy, Simplistic Farms. And of course, you can listen to the Growing Food and Feeding People podcast on all of the platforms, including Spotify, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, wherever you like to listen to your favorite podcasts at, you can find us there. If you'd like to support the show or get involved in Project Feed Your Neighbor, there is a link down in the show notes, or you can find us over on patreon.com at patreon/simplisticfarms. We hope you have a great week, make somebody smile. We'll talk to you on the next one.